see ISIL, the brutal, vicious death cult that, in the name of religion, carries out unspeakable acts of barbarism. And lest we get on our high horse and think this is unique to some other place, remember that during the Crusades and the Inquisition, people committed terrible deeds in the name of Christ. In our home country, slavery and Jim Crow all too often was justified in the name of Christ.
Welcome into Hour 3 of America's Forum with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth. And Miranda, the president's comments at last week's prayer breakfast still are attracting a whole lot of attention.
That might be an understatement. It's actually creating a firestorm of attention. It set off fury from many Christians and Republicans, and now several Christians question whose side the president really is on.
For more on this story, let's go to Boston and former Mayor Ray Flynn, who also during his distinguished public career served as the United States Ambassador to the Holy See. Ray, it is always good to have you here on America's Forum. Thanks for getting there through the snow, and we'll get to the snow after we deal with the blizzard of controversy and comments coming in the wake of what the president had to say at the prayer breakfast. First, your take on what he said.
Well, I was very surprised, to say the least, listening and watching his comments. I think they're completely inaccurate. I think from a historical perspective, I think he's way off the mark. And in terms of solving some of the problems that we're dealing with worldwide, religious intolerance, beheading of Christians across the world, I think it's a diversion to start talking about 2,000-year history of civilization, if that's what you want to call it. I think we ought to address the issue at hand. And I think the president was using this as a diversion to move away from ISIS, to move away from radical Muslim fundamentalism, extremism, and to shift focus onto another issue.
So do you think the president should apologize for his comments?
Well, the president really understands, I'm sure, before he makes these comments. I think he's certainly an intelligent man. He makes these comments willingly. It's they're thought out. He knows exactly what he's going to say, and I think that he's not in a position to apologize. I think what he said is what he believes, and how he thinks he ought to conduct politics in the United States. Again, if you don't have a good game plan dealing with a particular issue, create a diversion to shift focus away from your inability to deal with the current problem. And I think that's what the president has done, like most politicians, or many politicians do.
And we are going to switch gears to another subject, very important one though, Ray, and that is the upcoming visit to the United States by Pope Francis. While the pontiff is here, he is going to address a joint session of Congress. As the former ambassador to the Holy See, your take on the congressional address by Pope Francis?
Well, I think this coming year, 2015, is going to be one of the most historic and one of the most moving eras in church history or religion history here in the United States. I mean, when you think about where we've come from, the know-nothing era and so forth, to progress over the years, and now we're starting to fall into this trap here of religious instability and moral instability, and not only in America, but across the world. I think this is an incredible period of time for the Pope coming to the United States, not only addressing the United Nations and the Congress, but also addressing domestic issues within the Catholic Church. I hope the Pope says clearly and unequivocally that Catholics and Christians have to get more involved in the political climate in our country, because they've taken a back seat for too long, and it's time that they started to move out in the field, in the arena where the game is played, not as spectators are not watching it on television. And I think the Pope has also a glorious opportunity to talk about religious intolerance, not only in the United States and religious freedom in the United States, but address that very issue in the United Nations and the Congress of the United States. So these are three major events that the Holy Father can address, that the world needs that kind of moral voice.
And Ray Flynn, given your unique perspective, not only as ambassador to the Holy See, but your days as mayor of Boston, when we come back following the break, there are a couple of big issues to talk about. One of those things, the four-letter word snow and how Boston deals with that, but also the whole notion of guns. Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, had something to say. We're going to talk more about that and get your reaction to all of that. That is straight ahead as we continue with former ambassador and former Boston Mayor Ray Flynn. We hope you'll stay tuned too as America's Forum continues on Newsmax TV right after this. With Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth back on America's Forum. Miranda, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg has suggested something that he believes will save lives in the minority community.
Yeah, at the Aspen Institute, he said the government should work to disarm minority males under the age of 25.
I think the Second Amendment applies to everybody. At any rate, let us continue our conversation with former Boston Mayor Ray Flynn. Ray, you hear this from former Mayor Bloomberg, who says that 95% of murders fall into a specific category, male minority, between the ages of 15 and 25. Your reaction to the notion of barring minority males under age 25 access to firearms?
Well, unfortunately, I think Michael Bloomberg has created a scapegoat here, and that is all black males in America. We should be doing things constructively, cities across the country, to build the future for young black males. I remember when I was mayor, we were involved in a similar kind of situation. And I used to make the comment, you know, keep a kid in sports and you keep a kid out of courts. The other way you could say it is, you know, keep them in school, give them an education, give them hope, give them a future. And that's what we focused on, that's what we stressed. I don't think just by accusing all black males, or 95% of black males, of leading this destructive lifestyle is helpful to what you want to achieve in creating a viable community and a viable city. I would work in the best interest of the black males by doing constructive things for them, sports and schools, education, jobs. Create those kind of issues of hope and opportunity, and you won't even be talking about drugs and guns and violence.
What about distrust? We've been talking about it for months. There's a lot of distrust with minority communities when it comes to law enforcement. Is there a way to kind of bridge that gap?
You know, when I was mayor of Boston, the police department and the minority community worked very, very well together. Of course, they were well represented. The minority community was well represented on the police department, not only in the rank and file police officers, but also in the hierarchy as well, and in senior positions. So, you know, it has to be reflective. The police department, the fire department, the emergency services have to be reflective of the minority community. They have to be out of those cars, out of those police stations, into those neighborhoods, developing a relationship. Just the other day, we talked about the Police Athletic League and how much that did in terms of bringing police and kids, cops and kids together. Those are the kind of programs that really work. Take my word for it. I saw it for 10 years in Boston. If you're willing to do the hard work, bringing cops and kids together, you'll see a lot of the end to this kind of hostility that supposedly exists. And I think a lot of it is manufactured, by the way, by activists and people who have a political agenda rather than by parents of black kids and black kids themselves. I think they have more respect for the cops than what we see on national television.
What do you think fuels all this violence? Because if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying it's not guns. People need to focus more on education and sports.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm a poor working class kid that came out of the streets of South Boston. We had Boys and Girls Clubs, we had CYO, we had all kinds of sports. We never got into trouble, not because we're angels, but because we had other things to do. We had volunteers. We had organizations that looked out for us and protected us. You know, I see a diminution youth sports programs now in cities like Boston, when that's what we ought to be focusing on. And I think that we should get back to basics, get back to those common values of helping kids develop character. And the best way to do that, I think, is through sports, community activities, the church, clergy, working with volunteers in the community, and then, of course, doing something in the schools that makes sure that the kids value the importance of an education. Tell them they can be anything that they want to be growing up if they only stay in school and study. That's what we learned. That's what helped us.
Ray, only about a minute left. Snow, you got a lot, and more is on the way. Is snow one of the toughest things for a big city mayor to handle, like a place like Boston?
Yeah, it is in many respects, JD. But one thing we have, and I'm still out there watching all these public works employees, police, fire, emergency, medical people. Boston is a very resilient city. Boston has a lot of good, hard-working, determined workers. A lot of the police officers, firemen, they're all former veterans. The clash just went on the other day. 34 new firefighters, they're all veterans. Afghanistan, Iraq War. So these are people who are dedicated to begin with. And so I think that's the reason why we do so well, is because of the dedication of the workforce and the cooperation of the citizens. Look, we're used to this. You know, this is in Naples, Florida, where you are. This is Boston, Massachusetts. We're resilient. We're here for the long haul.
Well, that's fine, Mr. Mayor. And Ray Flynn, you have a standing invitation to come down to sunny South Florida. For now, you have our thanks, and America's Forum will be right back.